Hello Facebook, hello YouTube, what is up everybody? This is Ruben and I am back with another Ruben Report. For today's video, we're going to be doing my short-term 3-month review for my KLR 650 2005 California model. I've had it for exactly 3 months on the dot as of the time of me making this video, and we have reached a total of 15,115.7 miles. I bought the bike when it had 11,600 miles on the odometer, so we're pretty much right at the 3,500 mile mark, give or take. And yeah, the past 3 months have been fantastic. I have pretty much been using this bike as my main method of transportation. Generally speaking, every day that I've needed to get on it and go somewhere, I've been able to do so. But I'm also not gonna lie, there's also been certain times, either due to weather, especially 2-3 weeks ago, here in Northern California, we've had winter storms where a lot of parts of the city and surrounding areas in my city, or around the area that I live, was flooding like crazy. Especially the back roads where I generally ride. The back roads were completely flooded. There was a stay-at-home order, or a state of emergency was declared by our governor here in California. So for that period of time, a week and a half or so, I actually just worked from home. So I didn't need to commute with the bike. And anytime I actually needed to go somewhere, I would rather drive my truck, actually, because it has a much higher ground clearance than my other vehicles. So it really wasn't much. But yeah, you know, so is life. Dealing with the winter season. But other than that, every day that I've been able to get out and ride, I've been able to do so. So really, it's just been up to my willingness and my ability to throw a leg over, turn the key, and it has been ready for service every single day, which has been great. As far as my ownership experience so far, like maintenance wise, I've done 2 oil changes. Obviously the typical stuff of adjusting and cleaning the chain. I've also done quite a bit of just catching up with maintenance. My most recent video was installing the new front brake rotor, which this thing has saved me already. I am really glad I put this on. I'm gonna tell you guys a little story about that. I was riding on a 2-lane road, and there was someone coming from the other side. There was a lot of stopped up traffic, but this person, I guess he wanted to turn in and go to like a driveway or some other business, just cut across the lane. And so there's like a whole like stack of cars, and you know, it's not that person's fault, they couldn't see me, but I was coming on the right side in the right lane. And as soon as they came out, I was just right there. The person saw me and I saw them at the last second, and those brakes stopped on a dime. Had I not had those brakes, the oversized brake rotor probably would have been in trouble. All right, so if you have a Gen 1 KLR and you use it to commute and you use it to, you know, as a transportation, I highly recommend get yourself the upgraded brake rotor. Okay. Others also recommend that you can get the I believe it's the SV650 brake caliper. You can do that as well. I'm not completely certain, but I just believe, this is just my opinion, I believe the brake rotor is what's going to give you the most improvement in stopping power, just because of the amplification and leverage, right? With the bigger rotor, you're going to have, not only do you have a much bigger radius than the stock rotor did, so a much greater leverage point, but also gives you a much bigger contact surface, and it's slotted in such a way as to dissipate heat a lot better. And with this particular setup, with just the oversized rotor for myself alone, it's enough to lock up the front wheel already as is. You can go ahead and throw on the SV caliper with possibly even, well, the stainless steel brake lines, that's not really necessarily going to do that much. It's just going to get the mushiness out of the brake lever. Mostly it's just that just affects the feel. But as far as clamping force, the twin piston caliper, the SV650 caliper, that'll give you a bit more. But my opinion, once you can lock the front wheel up pretty easily, I just think everything else is kind of overkill. But it also just depends, you know, like how fast you're actually riding this thing, or how loaded the bike is as well. Because you gotta also be reminded, this bike doesn't have ABS, so having much more sensitive brakes, I mean, it's up to you. I personally don't want my brakes to be super sensitive. I want them to be effective. I want them to lock up. I want them to be powerful, but I don't want them to lock up, you know, too easily, especially if I get panicked. But as is, let me go ahead and get this bike down. Yeah, as is, I can literally use one finger and pull the brake, and it's not going anywhere. All right, and that's how I usually ride around now. I can just use one finger to pull in the brake. Obviously, I use the rear brake and downshift as well, so it doesn't take much to get the bike to stop now versus before. All right, but back on the topic of actual maintenance, what I was trying to get at with the front brake rotor is, when I actually did that video, I went ahead and got in there and cleaned up the bearings as well, and put some repacked with new grease. And what else when it comes to the typical other stuff? I think I said this in another video. I replaced the air filter not too long ago, did a valve adjustment about 1,000 miles, after a little over 1,000 miles after I bought it, or 1,500 miles, I believe. We can just take a look at my maintenance log, and we can talk about all those different items here in a moment. All right, so here we are taking a look at my maintenance log for my KLR 650. And before we get started, we're going to take a look at this legend here that is going to define what all these stars mean. Blue stars are for upgrades and new components. So anything that I added to the bike as accessories or upgrades, swapping out for superior components. Green is going to be oil changes. Red is going to be valve adjustments or any other major maintenance. These are generally maintenances that are not typical, possibly out of schedule, and or just things that have a certain level of difficulty and is time consuming. The orange is going to be minor maintenances. This is just your typical lubricating, cleaning, adjusting things, the simple stuff. And then the pink, these are scheduled maintenance intervals. So red stars are not always bad. As long as they're accompanied with a pink star, I mean, you're going to have to do valve adjustment at some point, right? But we don't want to have too many red stars without being accompanied by a pink star. All right, so going on with my maintenance here, as you guys can see, the vast majority of the maintenances or really just work that I've been doing on my bike, you see a whole lot of blue, a whole lot of orange, 2 greens, so 2 oil changes, but typically a whole lot of blue and a whole lot of orange. So overall, the vast majority of my ownership experience thus far has been modifying the bike to my liking, installing new components and upgrades, and just basic general maintenance. The red stars that we do have are my first valve adjustment. This interval, the valve adjustment that the previous owner did before, he did it like 6 or 7 years ago. I have no idea how many miles ago that was. Could have been 6,000, 7,000, could have been more. No clue. It was just a good idea. I just found that it would be a good idea to just take a look. And this is what we found. I found that the right exhaust was out of spec, and everything else was in spec. The left exhaust was pretty much on the limit, so I went ahead and adjusted everything pretty much to the same, around the 0.2 millimeters, except for my right intake, because that was already really close. And this other red star is not really a major maintenance, to be honest with you. This was really the install of an upgrade, and that upgrade is the Eagle Mic doohickey. I categorize it as a red star just because of how difficult it was, but it's not really a major maintenance. So yeah, we installed the Eagle Mic doohickey with the torsion spring. And then this other red star was, again, checking valve clearances after 1,000 miles and correcting the camshaft timing. I come from a bike that has been dealing with a lot of valve recession issues, so I took this time while I had the cams off to correct the camshaft timing. I learned about this particular upgrade that folks do. They advance the exhaust valve, the exhaust camshaft by 1 tooth. Some say it increases performance. I went ahead and set that back to stock. That's just something that I wanted to do. And I was also just curious about whether or not my valves were going to stay in spec, which they did. And everything else is, again, just regular maintenance and or me installing new components. Yeah, there's definitely other maintenance items that I have within my radar. I'm going to be soon trying to get to the wheel bearings in the back as well. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Real shortly, we're just going to talk about performance. The performance when it comes to this bike, or at least the performance that I care about as a commuter, is just MPG performance mainly. I didn't necessarily, I mean, it's kind of an oxymoron when you say, KLR and performance, right? It's not a very high performance bike, but it is a very reliable and a very capable bike. It can do everything you need it to do. It's just not going to do everything well. But the MPG performance, I generally speaking, it averages out around 45 mpg. There's some days, just depending on how I ride, because I ride this bike very mixed fashion. And I would typically have to say, when it comes to my mileage overall, the 3,500 miles in total, it's close to 50-50, mainly because the first 1,000 miles or so was actually ridden mainly on highways. That's when I did my trip back and forth from LA, and also just riding around LA using highways to get around. So a lot of the first 1,000 miles was really ridden highway, and then when I came back home and started to get back into the groove of things, commuting and things of that nature, there's days where I might take the back roads to work. There's also days where it's just more convenient to take the highway, or I just have to take the highway because I'm running late. Again, when it comes to this bike, whatever is more convenient, that's just what I use. And so the majority of the beginning, or the first like 1,000 miles or so, was ridden highway. All the rest, I would generally say possibly anywhere between 30 to 40% highway, and the rest inner city or back roads. So because my riding, especially the riding that I generally do, it's very mixed, I tend to average somewhere around 45 mpg, just like I said. If I ride on the highway exclusively, which is really, I only was able to test this while I was riding back and forth from LA, it's more around 40 mpg. If I ride back roads exclusively, it's a little over 50 mpg. But I actually have my most recent fill up, basically the fill up that I did this morning. I'll show you guys the screenshots here in just a second. This is the bike after I finished filling up. Got a full gas tank. The next picture here is the amount of gallons used and the amount of miles on the tripometer that was traveled. That brings us to a grand total of 46.98, basically 47 miles of the gallon. So yeah, the MPG that I got today was almost 47 MPG. But yeah, it just depends on how much highway I actually do. Sometimes I get close to 47, 46. Sometimes it's 44, 45. I've seen the lowest 43. It just depends on how much highway I'm doing and what's what. But average is about 45. All right. Okay. We'll move on to the next topic. Now I want to talk about some upcoming upgrades. I know in my last video I was saying that I was gonna do the subframe bolt upgrade, and I've kind of been slacking on that. Some other things came up, but not only do I want to do the subframe bolt upgrade, which I have here, I'm also wanting to play around with the sprockets. So I have a 42 tooth sprocket here. The current gearing setup that I have on my bike is a 16 tooth front and the stock rear, and it rides great the way that it is. When I'm on the back roads though, which that's primarily where I like to ride, is on the back roads, my sweet spot is around 3,500 RPMs. That's just where I like to keep the motor. But at 3,500 RPMs with the current gearing setup, the bike will go 52 miles an hour GPS, or a 55 indicated on the speedometer. And I would like for it to be a little bit closer to 55. If I can get it if I can get it to 55 miles an hour at 3,500 RPM, or maybe even 3,600 RPM, I'd be happy. So that's what I wanted to experiment with this. Just go one tooth smaller in the back, and hopefully we can bring that cruising speed up a little bit more. Because, you know, me riding on the back roads, cruising around at 3,500 RPM, I just love it. But folks are still passing, even if I'm going an actual 55 miles an hour GPS, you know, a little bit higher, around like 3,800 RPM, folks are still going to pass me up anyway. But yeah, so that's something I wanted to play around with. I also I have a 15 tooth front sprocket as well. So that's somewhere in the garage. I wanted to just experiment to see for myself how the bike handles with stock gearing, because I just never ridden it with stock gearing. And so this is also something that I bought. This is the prevailing torque nut from Ego Mike, just so I can take the front sprocket off and on a lot easier. Because in the future, possibly, we'll see when summer or spring rolls around, I might actually want to take a stab at some off-road adventure riding for the first time. Maybe. We'll see. I've never ridden in the dirt before. I'm kind of new to motorcycles, but this bike has so far proven itself to be very reliable, and I wouldn't mind riding out to some remote location and, you know, dabbling my toes a little bit. So we'll figure that out. And before I do that, that's why I definitely want to upgrade the subframe. I might put I will be putting the beefed up skid plate that the bike came with back on. And I'd also would most definitely need to address the suspension on the bike. The suspension on the bike is obviously very, very, very soft. And the front forks is something that I could do on my own. You can buy the progressive springs, as I was looking at and really researching. But for the rear, the reason why I'm hesitant for the rear is, again, I use this bike as a daily method of transportation, and having to take the rear shock off, I could take it off. I just don't have the tools here, and neither do I want to invest in getting the tools to be able to rebuild the shock. I know it's probably not that difficult, but I just think it's a lot better if I can send it to a place, which there's places to send them to. I was researching Top Gun. They make excellent shocks, especially if you want to get like really high rate springs. So that's something that I would definitely want to do. Go with a Top Gun shock with a really, really high spring rate. The only downside of going with a not even just going with a Top Gun shock, just in general, I would have to take the shock off. I would have to send it to them. It's going to be maybe a week, a couple days. I'm not sure what the turnaround is going to be for that, but it might be a week. It might be even longer for shipping and labor. So the cost of having the shock rebuilt and, you know, upgraded is really not the issue. It's also the downtime of the bike. Because like I said, I use this as a main method of transportation. So if it's if it's going to be down for a week and a half, that means I'm going to have to use my other vehicles to get around, which I'm trying to avoid because gas prices, although they're quite low at the moment, they're starting to rise up again. A little over $4 now, which isn't that bad, especially comparing to how much it was around like summertime or springtime last year. So yeah, I've been steadily watching the gas prices rise back up, so they're starting to climb back up there. And you know, if I actually do, like I said, if I send the shock off, it's like what, $250 plus shipping back and forth. So maybe a little over $250 to get that whole rebuilt in the back. And then I can just purchase, you know, the progressive shocks in the front, the fork seals, the fork oil, all the little tools. For the front, it's probably like $160, $180. Just depends on where I get the stuff. All together, rebuild the whole suspension, $450 or so, possibly $450. But then on top of that, you know, gas costs of driving my other vehicles. So that's why I'm kind of a little bit hesitant on that. If I'm going to do that, especially the rear shock, it's definitely going to have to be during a point in time where I can have planned downtime. Like maybe I'm on vacation, maybe there's something else going on where I can just take advantage of the opportunity. I really wish I took advantage of it, you know, 3 weeks ago when we had the winter storm where I just couldn't really ride the bike. It would have been an excellent opportunity to do it then, but yeah. So we'll see when that comes up. But all in all, for just regular commuting like I've been doing, it works fine. But I would definitely like to have the suspension addressed. All right, I think that's pretty much it concerning upgrades with the bike. I guess we could talk about my progress so far. Again, I'm using this motorcycle to commute daily, and I am tracking whether or not it is effective in being a everyday commuter bike, and so far it is absolutely excelling. My estimated annual mileage for this motorcycle is around 13,200 miles of commuting, plus back and forth from work, and then plus miscellaneous mileage. I'm estimating around 14,400 miles a year. And so far, at least to this point in time, I should have 3,600 miles on the odometer, or 3,600 miles completed. We have 3,500. Obviously, again, we were down for about a week and a half due to winter storms. So, had the winter storms not been an issue, we will be actually exceeded our mileage mark. But we're doing very well. As far as like actual downtime, we have none, which is great. All right, that's pretty much it. I am definitely have, again, these upgrades videos are still going to be coming. I might even do a video where I test top speed and performance between different gearing ratios, because every time when I go online and try to research the topic of gearing, it's probably been mentioned before, but I don't really get to see specifically like 1542 gearing ratio or 1642 or hell even 17. Okay, I'm not going to go over to 17, but I'm just going to use what it is that I got. But definitely I want to test stock gearing, then the 15 front with a 42 rear, 16 tooth, well, what I have now, the 16 tooth, and then the 43 rear, and then the 16 tooth with the 42 rear. See how that all compares to one another. how it performs. And also I would do the install for these other subframe bolt upgrade. It's gonna happen sometime soon. And lastly, I would like to share my experience with winter riding so far. Come out with that type of video, because this has been my first winter that I've actually ridden on a motorcycle, and it's been a learning experience. Obviously, last year with the other bike that I bought, that we talked about in other videos that I made, I got that bike towards like the middle of January last year, but I really wasn't riding it much until around February, and I definitely wasn't commuting with it really until the end of March. So having had the opportunity to experience a full winter on this motorcycle, especially with it being a carbureted bike, I would like to share just my tips and tricks, also some of the winter gear that I've been using, especially those who are budget conscious, which is basically every KLR owner. Gotta remember, the cheapest thing on the KLR is a rider. So I think that would be a really fun video to share, especially for you guys out there who are trying to commute or just ride on a budget, and would like to utilize every opportunity to ride out there, even in colder weather. All right, that is about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for tuning in and wanting to keep up with my adventures or just my progress here on my channel. Obviously, stay tuned. Those videos of the upgrades and the other videos that I mentioned are going to be coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching. Stay safe out there, and peace.